Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope. I can't believe it's taken me this long to do a Shovel Knight casual review. I have loved Shovel Knight ever since I played it for the Nintendo 3DS, and I've played it so many times I'm surprised I haven't recorded a video of it yet. Now, Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope is initially just called Shovel Knight. However, they have made 3 other Shovel Knight games and dubbed the whole package to be Shovel Knight Treasure Trove. And so the first of these games is now called Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope, where you actually do play as Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is actually the first video game that I ever bought for the Nintendo Switch. This is before I received The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I went and I downloaded Shovel Knight Treasure Trove because that came with Shovel Knight Spectre of Torment. They didn't make that game for the Nintendo 3DS, so if I wanted to play the next one, I would need to play on a more modern day platform, which is why I immediately downloaded it and played through Spectre of Torment. But we're not here to talk about Spectre of Torment yet. We're here to talk about Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope. Now, Shovel Knight controls fairly basic in this 2D action platformer. He can do a short-ranged horizontal attack with his shovel where he just swings it forward, but the main mean of attack and the most fun mean of attack is he can bounce on his shovel like a pogo stick. So if you've ever played DuckTales for the Super Nintendo, I think it is, it's basically like that. So you can continuously bounce on your enemies or obstacles using this pogo stick shovel attack. Now, throughout the game, you can purchase and acquire these different weapons and items that do different things. These all take a certain amount of resource, some kind of mana to use, but you are able to upgrade both your health and this mana pool, essentially, using currency. And so these items do various amount of things, and I think they did a good job coming up with a bunch of different items that do fairly different things. Some of my favorite were a bouncy ball that bounces all over the field. I would use that often against bosses. One has you like glide through the air, so this can help with your platforming. One, it makes you like so you can punch through these blocks. There's one that makes you turn invincible for a brief amount of time. So a fun amount of different items, and they always did a good job of showcasing these items and what they do when you first acquire them, but there are also these one-off little bonus levels that you kind of help showcase what these items do a little more as well. In addition to purchasing these items and health and mana upgrades, you can also purchase a small amount of upgrades to your shovel, so it does various things, like you can dig up treasure with just one swing instead of multiple, or you can do a charge up attack. You can also purchase different colored armor sets for Shovel Knight, and these just do various amounts of things. Your health pool is smaller, but you can use more of your mana. One of my favorite armor sets was the silver one, where every time I do 2 pogo jumps on an enemy, I can do a super strong horizontal attack, and this was very beneficial when going against bosses. I guess this would be a good time to talk about the bosses, as Shovel Knight is not the only knight in this game. Essentially, it's like kind of like Mega Man. I feel like they took some inspiration from Mega Man when making this game, where each knight has their own trait, their own characteristic. And so as far as the story goes, Shovel Knight and his partner Shield Knight got separated. Shovel Knight was led to believe that Shield Knight died, and so he went into hiding, but then the tower that Shield Knight died in started acting up again, and so he decided to go investigate once and for all to find out what happened to Shield Knight. And along the way, it turns out that this evil enchantress is inhabiting this tower, and she has hired these Knights of No Quarter, which there are basically like 8 different knights with 8 different levels that you have to go through, and these knights act as the bosses. So you have like King Knight, you have Mole Knight, you have Plague Knight, Spectre Knight is obviously one, and all of these knights have a themed level to go along with it. So you go through the level, but then you finally defeat the corresponding knight, and this will open up more paths in the overworld for you to eventually make your way to the evil enchantress's tower. Now, one of the cool features that they did add to this game that wasn't initially on this, I could say that about a lot of different features about Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, because this had a lot of constant support to it over the years, but they added this feature where you can kind of do a little bit of gender bending, in which you can choose the gender for all of the knights: Shield Knight, Shovel Knight, the Knights of the No Quarter, the Enchantress, all of them. I chose to do random this time, so for instance, my King Knight was actually Queen Knight because they changed the gender to female. So fun little feature there. Another fun feature that they added into this game is amiibo support, and I love the Shovel Knight amiibos. I actually have all of them except for the gold Shovel Knight amiibo, which I don't know why I don't just go ahead and get it already, because it's really not that expensive. Ironically, the original Shovel Knight amiibo is more expensive than the gold Shovel Knight amiibo at this point. But yeah, I have all the other ones, and these amiibos unlock cool features. For instance, the Shovel Knight amiibo unlocks kind of like this almost like this feature thing that you can, as just when you play through the game, you can upgrade your Shovel Knight amiibo, and then this unlocks like different outfits and customization. I didn't really play around with it this playthrough because I just wanted to play as the traditional Shovel Knight game, but it kind of gives you some, almost like an RPG mechanic where just playing the game, it's cool to see like your Shovel Knight amiibo level up and unlock these different cosmetics. In addition to that feature, you can also get these little fairies that will follow you around. They don't do anything, but they have these cute little animations. So I mostly walked around with the Plague Knight fairy, and he would just throw these tiny little bombs at enemies, and it doesn't do anything, or like he'll try to like lift up these giant gems of treasure for himself. And I really do like the amiibo, and I like the features that they added to the game. I wish more amiibos did fun things like these ones do. In these levels, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a very difficult game, but maybe that's just because I've played through it so many times at this point. Like, there are some instant deaths. Like, if you touch spikes, you instantly die. If you fall down a pit, you instantly die. And I do remember the first time playing through this maybe being a little frustrated, because it is challenging for sure. But as you play through the level, there are these checkpoints, and once you die, you go back to the most recent checkpoint. But this has a really cool risk and reward system where if you die, you lose a certain amount of your money, and these monies just appear in like these golden money bags. And so your objective now is to get to the part where you died and collect these money bags before you die again, because if you die a second time before you collect that initial money bag set, then you permanently lose that money. So it's pretty risky. In addition to this, you are also welcome to destroy these check marks in order to get some money there. That always felt too risky for me. I probably could have gotten away with destroying a lot more of these checkpoints. However, money never was really a difficult thing for me to come by. By the end of a traditional playthrough, I had more than enough money to buy everything that I wanted to. Sometimes I'm not able to purchase all of the different armor sets, but you're only able to wear one anyway, so unless you're going for a completionist run, it's really not that big of a deal. And if you're not dying a ton, then you won't lose a lot of that money either. And so I just felt it wasn't worth the frustration or the stress if I did happen to destroy a check mark. Then I would go all the way back to like the beginning of the level rather than just start at the check mark for convenience sake. It's worth losing out on that money, in my opinion. You can also find hidden music sheets hidden throughout all of the levels, and you can turn these music sheets into the bard, and he will give you 500 money as well. And then the cool thing about this is if you want the bard to replay any music from the game, he would be more than happy to do so as you navigate around through the town, talk to the NPCs, hear what quirky things they have to say. And so it's just like an additional fun incentive to not only unlock this music that you can play whenever, but you also get paid to do so. And the music in this game is actually really good. It's pretty iconic at this point, at least in my opinion, because I love Shovel Knight so much, so the music for me is fairly memorable. You know, the levels really do a good job of setting up a mechanic, not necessarily with an item, but just a certain mechanic that is in the level, and then building upon it, increasing the challenge. So the first room you'll go into, you'll discover these, let's say, platforms that slowly rise up in the air once you land on them. And so there's not really any danger in this first room. You just kind of understand that these platforms will slowly rise up when you step on them. And then the next level, they might add little enemies up above where the platforms are, so you know now that you run the risk of, if you land on these platforms, then you'll go up at the enemies. And then the next room you go into, there might be spikes with the instant death. So it builds upon this difficulty, but it does it in a way where it introduces it to you first and then ramps up the stakes from there. And so it has a good learning curve without ever having to like really explain anything. It explains it by you playing through it. And exploring it on your own. Once you finally go through the level, you have a little dialogue with one of the knights that you're playing against, and after you defeat them at the end, then Shovel Knight will have a little campfire scene and he'll fall asleep. And occasionally, this happens about 3 different times, you dream of saving this Shield Knight that is falling from the sky. But before Shield Knight is falling and it goes all in slow motion, there's a ton of enemies all around, and you can hurry and try and defeat as many as possible to get even more money from there. And then I don't know what happens if you don't actually catch Shield Knight. Maybe you don't collect the resources in the dream that you collected, but I always just collect her. And it's kind of like this iconic moment, and I'm not going to spoil it here, but it leaves an impression on you, and as the story goes on, you'll come to learn why. In addition to the traditional game, you also have these like roaming characters. The overworld basically works like Super Mario Bros. 3 in that you have these different paths, and then there's sometimes roaming enemies, these one-off enemies that you can go and encounter, and these aren't necessarily like the knights that are under the Enchantress's power, but you just like these one-off characters that have a couple sentences in Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope, but these characters tend to get fleshed out later in the future Shovel Knight games. And so you can face off against them, and usually they'll give you some amount of money after you beat them too. There's also achievements. I have never actually gone for all of these achievements. Some of them seem really hard, and I'm not good enough at Shovel Knight in order to get all of them, but it is something fun that you can shoot for as well. Overall, it's just fun gameplay, fun music, fun graphics, fun characters. Everything about Shovel Knight is so fun, and I'm just so fond of it, and I'm always excited for my next Shovel Knight playthrough. And now that they've built upon this Shovel Knight franchise and they've added these other Shovel Knight games, the fun doesn't end after you just beat the first Shovel Knight. So I am so excited to jump into Plague Knight next. And these games are short enough that I never really feel burnt out whenever I play through them. Now, I've never done a full, complete Shovel Knight Treasure Trove playthrough before. The last time I played Shovel Knight was when King Knight last came out. So I guess that was, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. So it really has been that long since I played through Shovel Knight. Wow, time seems to fly pretty fast. So I'm excited for my full Shovel Knight Treasure Trove playthrough. I know that there are other Shovel Knight games that I've never really touched. Maybe I'll still have that Shovel Knight itch and want to play through those spin-offs as well once I'm done with all of these. I'm going to give this game a 5 out of 5. No surprise there. But that's it for now as far as Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope goes. I'll see you in the next video with Shovel Knight Plague of Shadows, I believe it's called, and you get to play as Plague Knight. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!